The light hit the table like fire on glass. Laughter snapped through the air, bright and careless. Across from me, my boyfriend leaned back, voice smooth enough to cut. "If you don't like my friend's rude jokes," he said, "you can just pay and leave." The room froze, forks mid-air, glasses half raised. I folded my napkin, once set $60 beside the plate. "Thanks for the option." The chair scraped against marble as I stood. Their laughter tried to follow but broke halfway. When the door shut behind me, one of them whispered, almost laughing, "She won't actually leave, will she?" When I was younger, I thought silence kept things from breaking. Turns out it just delays the sound. Victor and I met at a company mixer 3 years ago. He liked to tell people we were opposites that worked. He wore crisp shirts and spoke in marketing slogans. I wore steel-toed boots and carried a lunch pail. It amused him at first, the novelty of someone who could wire a breaker box but didn't care about hashtags or pitch decks. He'd watch me scrub grease from my hands and say, "You make hard work look poetic." I didn't know that was the prelude to pity. At home, our world split neatly down the middle. His side smelled like cologne and spreadsheets. Mine smelled like mineral oil and dusted copper. I'd fix the buzzing outlet he ignored, label the fuse box so he'd know what not to overload. He'd scroll his phone, hum approval, and say, "You're a natural problem solver." It sounded like praise until he used it as proof I could handle anything, especially his neglect. When his friends came over, the jokes started light. "So, Emery, do you charge by the hour, even off the clock?" I'd smile because smiling bought peace. Victor would smirk, hand them another drink, and say, "She's tough. She can take it." That was the script they mocked I endured, and he got to seem charming for dating down. I remember one Sunday morning when the kitchen light flickered. I climbed a chair, adjusted the wire, felt the faint warmth of current through my fingertips. Victor watched from the doorway, coffee in hand. "You always have to fix things, don't you?" he said. I laughed, not seeing the warning there. The pattern was steady as voltage. Every slight wrapped in humor, every silence mistaken for agreement. I kept records of bills, receipts, repairs, proof of contribution he never asked for. He'd say, "You worry too much about details," while I watched him worry only about appearances. By the winter of his promotion, I'd stopped explaining myself. I'd learned that talking to someone who listens for weaknesses is like grounding a live wire. It saves the system, not you. So I nodded through his stories, laughed at the right cues, and waited. That night at the restaurant wasn't the first time I'd felt invisible. It was just the first time I decided not to stay that way. The promotion changed the air between us. Victor started talking about himself like a brand, market value, visibility, momentum. I became part of the backdrop, the story he used to look grounded. "She keeps me real," he'd joke at parties, arms slung around me like a tagline. His friends loved it. They called me the practical one, which was their polite way of saying small. Dinners with them felt like job interviews I hadn't applied for. They'd ask about my work not to know, but to measure. "So what's it like doing manual labor?" one said, sipping a drink that cost more than my toolbox. Victor laughed with them, then looked at me, waiting for me to play along. I did because I'd learned that resistance only turned into proof of their point. He began spending more evenings out networking. I'd find receipts for Champagne Valet parking dinners for 4 when I'd eaten alone. When I asked, he'd say, "These events matter for my future. You understand that, right?" I did. What I didn't understand was how my effort never seemed to count as ambition, just maintenance. One Friday, I came home to find him rehearsing a speech in the mirror. His suit jacket gleamed under the lamp. "Big night," he said. "Don't wear work clothes this time, okay?" The words landed soft but stayed sharp. I stood there still smelling like solder and steel and said nothing. That night, I scrubbed the oil from under my nails until the water ran clear. I thought about how he'd once found those hands, beautiful proof. "You build things," he said. Now they were reminders that I didn't fit his picture. He started correcting how I spoke, laughing when I said ain't or gonna. He'd introduce me to people as Emery, "She's great with her hands," then glance around to see who caught the double meaning. By then I wasn't angry. I was cataloging every dismissal, every joke, every silence. The same way I kept receipts for parts and invoices for repairs, I was collecting evidence of something breaking. When he invited me to his promotion dinner, just a small thing with the guys, I knew what kind of night it would be. The table would be bright, the laughter rehearsed, and I would sit there smiling like background noise. Only this time, I wasn't bringing patience. I was bringing an ending. The steakhouse glowed like money, soft lighting, slow jazz, everything polished to reflect itself. 6 of us at the table. Victor at the head, his friends orbiting close, their laughter slick with whiskey. I was beside him, half in the frame, half out. It started small like it always did. Matthew stirred his drink without looking up. Still working with wires, Emery. Must be nice keeping things simple. Jason added, "Hey, she's good at connecting things, just not conversations." They laughed. Even Victor, especially Victor. I smiled because that's what you do when you've already learned the cost of defending yourself. "Simple work keeps the lights on," I said, cutting my steak. Steady hands, no tremor. Brandon smirked. "You should tell Victor that. He's been carrying the heavy load lately." Victor didn't stop them. He just reached for his glass eyes fixed on the plate, pretending civility. The sound of the knife against porcelain was louder than any of them expected. "It doesn't feel like joking," I said quietly. Jason leaned back. "Oh, come on." "Sensitive much?" Matthew grinned. "Don't make it weird. We're just teasing." Then Victor looked up, all fake calm, the kind men mistake for authority. "If you don't like my friend's rude jokes," he said, "you can just pay and leave." The table went still. Forks hovered midair. Someone's laugh died halfway. I folded my napkin, once placed it by my plate. "Thanks for the option." My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. I counted the bill in my head, entree wine tax tip. $60 exactly. I set the cash down, the edges crisp against linen. The air shifted. Even the waiter hesitated at the edge of the table. I pushed my chair back, metal against marble, a sound clean enough to slice the tension. Emery Victor said under his breath, still pretending control, "Don't be dramatic." I stood, keys cold in my palm. "I'm being precise." Brandon snorted. "She'll be back." Their laughter picked up again, thin, nervous. I walked through it, past their polished shoes and false confidence. At the door, I caught a fragment, Matthew whispering, "Wait, is she actually leaving?" Outside, the night air bit my skin. My reflection in the glass door looked like someone I hadn't met yet, still calm done. The laughter behind the glass faded into the hum of traffic. I slid into my truck, turned the key, and let the engine fill the silence. My phone lit up his name over and over. I didn't answer. Not yet. The dashboard light glowed against my hand, steady and warm like something newly wired. That was the moment I stopped being part of his story. The first few minutes after I left were quiet, almost too quiet. Then my phone began to hum on the passenger seat once, twice, again and again. Victor's name filled the screen like a system error. "You're overreacting. Come back and pay for the table. You're embarrassing me." Each message colder than the one before. I drove without music, the city sliding by in reflections of red lights and wet asphalt. By the time I reached the apartment, his calls had climbed to 20. I parked, turned off the engine, and sat there long enough for the silence to grow teeth. Inside, everything looked staged for someone else's life. His cologne still in the air, the champagne glasses from last week's celebration sitting untouched. I pulled out a duffel bag and started packing. Work shirts, tools, receipts. Every item I owned had proof-attached serial numbers, invoices, names in my handwriting. Documentation wasn't just a habit, it was armor. The phone buzzed again. "You invited everyone, you pay." I stared at the message until it blurred. Then I typed one line, "I paid for what I ordered." Send. Maya's reply came 2 minutes later. Door codes the same. "Tease on." That was enough. I left the keys on the counter and walked out. Her apartment smelled like detergent and cumin, something human and alive. She opened the door before I could knock. "You left." I did. Finally, she said, pressing a mug into my hands, "You look calm. It's unsettling." We sat in silence, the kind that means safety. My phone buzzed face down on the table until the sound stopped mattering. Then it lit up again, unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, Maya's phone pinged. She read the message, her eyes narrowing. "Brandon's girlfriend," she said. "She says they're planning something stupid. Ignore them." But I didn't ignore the warning. The next morning while Victor was at work, I drove back for what was mine. The hallway smelled like stale wine. A yellow notice fluttered under the door noise complaint. Inside the mess was worse than I'd imagined: takeout boxes, bottles, and an empty space where my PlayStation used to be. In the bedroom, I found my console half hidden under his jacket, and on the table, my laptop opened to Facebook Marketplace. Listings for my tools stared back at me. Fluke multimeter, $400. Klein voltage tester, $300. He'd even used my workbench for photos. I called the non-emergency line, explained everything, uploaded screenshots, documented all the officer said. If he sells anything, it's theft. Next, I called Mr. Chen, the landlord. His voice was polite but tight. He told me, "You abandoned the lease," he said. "I didn't abandon anything," I replied. "I left because he told me to." He sighed. "You've always paid on time. If you'd like to keep the apartment, we can talk." When I hung up, I took pictures of every listing, every item. Proof stacked neatly on the screen, like justice, waiting for a timestamp. That evening, Victor texted again. "You went through my stuff. You're insane. What's yours is mine." "Remember," I wrote back. "Selling someone's property isn't love. It's theft." Attached every screenshot plus the police report number. Then I put the phone down and waited. Mr. Chen's message came a few hours later, another noise complaint. One more, and he's evicted. I smiled for the first time in days. Some people fight with words. I prefer paperwork. Spring came early that year, soft lights spilling through the blinds of a smaller, quieter apartment. I'd taken over the lease. Victor was gone. The place smelled like lemon cleaner and possibility. My tools sat in a neat row under the window tags, still on names intact. The police restitution check lay folded beside my coffee mug, modest but proof that systems, when handled right, could speak louder than noise. Outside, my Honda waited. I'd rebuilt her piece by piece over 3 years, but she'd never looked more complete than she did that morning. Chrome catching sunlight, engine steady as a heartbeat. I turned the key. The sound wasn't loud, just clean, like clarity had a frequency. Maya leaned against her car across the lot, coffee in hand. "Feels different, doesn't it?" "Yeah," I said, adjusting the helmet strap. "Like quiet that belongs to me." The wind carried a hint of salt from the bay. I thought of the old apartment, the laughter that once filled its walls, the way it all collapsed under the weight of consequence. There was no satisfaction left in it, just relief. As I rolled out onto the open road, the world didn't feel like something I'd escaped. It felt like something I'd rewired. I used to think silence was surrender, that walking away meant giving up on something worth fixing. But silence, I learned, isn't weakness. It's wiring. You strip what's corroded, isolate the current, and reconnect only what's worth keeping. That's how circuits survive. The world still hums with noise, his name in someone else's story, their laughter echoing somewhere I don't live anymore, but none of it reaches me now. The power runs clean straight through my own hands. The Honda waits by the door, metal warm from the morning sun. I slide on my gloves, feel the leather mold to my skin. Somewhere in that quiet click of the ignition, I hear what peace actually sounds like. Not revenge, not escape. Just restoration, one wire at a time. One boundary closed, another finally alive. That's all silence ever wanted to be heard without having to explain. If you've ever had to rebuild yourself from the ruins, hit like and tell me where you're watching from.